Welcome to the Payday with Rayray podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rachel Bell. I'm here to make your life easier as an entrepreneur and teach you everything I've learned about building multiple seven-figure online businesses. And on this podcast, I'll be giving you my best advice, trainings, and mindset shifts so you can grow your business and, most importantly, make every day your payday. Well, howdy do, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Payday with Rayray. Ooh, I got something good for you today. I sat down and interviewed one of my good friends, Allyson. You may have seen her on CBS. You may have seen her on NBC. You may have seen her on Fox. You may have seen her on the business journals. You may have seen her on NPR. She is all over the place, and for good reason. Allyson is one of the most amazing and biggest energy and energizing people that I have ever been around. And I'm just so excited for you guys to learn from her today. We have a long road ahead of us learning about her story and her journey, and it's all worthwhile listening to because Allyson is one of the world's most trusted leadership advisors and sales experts for entrepreneurs. And I wanted to bring her on here because she has an amazing track record, and her team and her together have been able to coach over 3,000 entrepreneurial leaders and create over $105 million in new revenue over the past 8 years. So not only is she helping entrepreneurs, she's also stimulating the economy like a motherfucker. So she is an amazing woman, and her work behind the scenes just gives her clients the spotlight they deserve. That's her mission. And she is just the right mix of education. She has motivation. You are going to walk away from listening to this podcast episode with a new attitude, guaranteed. And most importantly, she is so good at holding the vision and inviting you to step up into your vision. So if you're ready to get to the next level and listen to this episode, I'm so excited. Make sure that you are taking notes. Allyson shares in this episode that note takers are money makers, which is definitely reflecting of one of my most strongly held beliefs. I believe that if you want to retain information, you got to write it down. It helps so much. And even if you never review those notes ever again, you've locked it into a different part of your memory bank that will stick with you for much longer than if you just assimilate it passively. So make notes, get ready for an adventure of a lifetime, and without any further ado, enjoy the episode. Here we go. For those of you who do not yet know the power and the beauty of Allyson Byrd, you are about to be very, very acquainted to who she is as a person. When I first met Allyson, I met her through a mastermind that we were a part of, and she was doing some teaching and contributing inside of that community, and she just stood out to me as one of the people that I wanted to become close with. I didn't know how or why or when that would happen in my life, but as time went on, I went to see her just crush it in life and her business, and I heard raving testimonials from everyone who she walked into their lives, and she was just crushing it over and over again. And then I got this crazy interesting little message about her having a birthday online summit. And she invited me to come on to her birthday summit. That was an online, I think it was like a masterclass or some sort of conferencing thing where you invited some people close to you in your life to share a blessing upon you for your birthday. And I thought that was, number one, what a queen move, like to actually take initiative to celebrate your own birthday. And number two, how creative is that? That's so internet marketer. That's so amazing. And it was classic. So at that time, I got a chance to share with her just how I admired her and what she meant to me, even from afar. And we've just grown closer since. And if you were at the Broke to Book Summit last October, you also know the power and beauty of Allyson. So excited to have you on. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, I just feel like the next few moments for those that are listening are going to be transcendent. And I feel like what we are about to share is the vulnerability and the tenderness, the openness, the authenticity, and the contribution that anyone in particular that's listening to this has been waiting for. Because whenever I show up, I always show up with an answer. And so I just want to say that if you're listening and you're driving, if you're listening and you're working out, if you're listening and you're washing dishes, make sure you come back to this and listen to this a second time. with a pen and a piece of paper, because repetition is the mother and father of our learning, and note takers are money makers. So if you want this to be a profitable experience for you, whether that's profitable in your bank account or profitable in your heart account, then come back to it and give yourself the gift of hearing this and getting this message into the fabric of who you be.
Note takers are money makers. That is a note to write down and remember that for later. When I think of you, Allyson, I think of 3 words, and I wanted to share that first and foremost, and these will become very evident through our conversation today. The first word that I think of when I think about you and your face and your being is power. I think of this queen that in a lot of ways I look up to, and I aspire to be more like you, the way that you just come into the space and you own it. I think of power, and with that power comes great responsibility, and I feel like you own and carry that with such amazing grace. So thank you for that. Another thing that I think of when I think of you is fun. So much fun. Allyson cracks me up, and she's able to drop in and become so spiritual and connected and deep and channeling things that I have never heard before come out of another human being's mouth. But also she's hilarious. And the final word that I think of when I imagine you is radiance. The radiance that you have, the life force that emanates from your being is insane. And I know that anyone who's listening to this episode is going to be able to feel that as well. And you didn't just get here overnight. As you were sharing with me before we started recording, this has been a long road to becoming more of who you are and shedding the layers of yourself that are not you, so that you can be more you. You can be more powerful, more fun, more radiant, more of who you are. And what I want to ask you first and foremost, before we dive into the sales nitty gritty and all the questions you guys have for Allyson, I want to know what it was like for you before all of this abundance occurred in your life, before you attracted the life that you currently have right now, which I prefaced in the introduction. What was your upbringing like? What was your childhood like? How did you become the person that you are today? And what was your before story? What was your before picture?
I think about my life today. My niece is 12 years old right now as we record this. And she sent me a message recently, and she said that at school, they were told that basically like to Google someone famous or successful. She told her teacher, I'm going to Google my aunt. And her teacher said, no, you have to Google someone successful.
Hold up.
And my niece is kind of like, well, I think my aunt's successful. So my niece, being my niece, says she is. And she says, pretty sure when you Google her, nothing's going to happen. And so my niece says, well, can we try? Because my niece really wanted it to be me, which touches my heart because it could have been Oprah. It could have been, a million folks, but she chose me. So when she Googles me, her teacher says, this isn't your aunt. And she says, yes, it is. And so she Googles me and Forbes comes up, USA Today, CNBC, Black Enterprise, Time Magazine, Time Money, business journals, NPR. And she's looking at my niece saying, how is this your family? Now, that's a whole story in and of itself, that teacher's judgment of my niece and her family and all the things. But as my niece was telling me the story, I got so emotional that is my truth, that is my reality. Because if you really knew me, what you would know to be true of the historical context before the bio, before the almost 8,000 students that have generated $260 million in new revenue over the last 9 years.
Ow! That's hot.
If you really knew me before that, if you knew me before Forbes knew me, and if you knew me before entrepreneur.com knew me, what you would know is that I was this little girl that was raised in the 80s Now, if you're a young girl, you're raised in the 80s and you're Black and you're in the South, what's very common is that your dad is not present. And that was true for me. My dad was in prison. So that wasn't weird for me to say my dad was in jail. Little girls next to me were like, oh, my dad too. It wasn't weird for me to say that my mom worked 3 jobs because little girls next to me were like, oh, my mom too. So my life felt very normal to spend more time at my grandparents than I did in my own home. It felt very normal that when we went apartment shopping and there was blood on the walls, that the manager would say, oh, we'll paint over that before you move in. It felt normal that we were on food stamps because everyone around me was on some type of subsidized government support. So I didn't understand financial freedom. I was always waiting for the first of the month. And I was always so excited for the first of the month because that meant we were going to go to the grocery store. I was going to go get my snacks. Life was going to be good. And my mom was going to be in a good mood because provision was there. So my association with money at a young age was provision and a good mood. And so that's where I think I kind of created that seeking for that. I always wanted to see my mother's energy rise, her vibrational frequency. Of course, I didn't know that at 3, 4, and 5, but I knew it in my gut.
Right.
So before my reality today, that was my life. And one day I realized when I was 15, I dropped out of high school. I went back when I was 19, graduated when I was 20. And I started reading the statistics of African Americans and females. And I realized I was living that statistic. And I thought, if that statistic were so, there's another statistic I can make real. And that's when my pursuit toward success began. Now I'm in a different pursuit toward fulfillment. But I believe that the prelude to fulfillment is the pursuit of success. Can I have achievement, an achievement that I'm in command of versus what I borrow? So a career, you typically are borrowing achievement from promotions and acknowledgement from others. When you step into entrepreneurial independence, you are the dictator of that achievement. But here's the piece that many of us as entrepreneurial women miss. You are also the one who has to clap for your damn self. And we forget to do that too often.
Or we just remember we should do it and then we choose not to and instead just scroll our phones more.
Yeah.
Do a little bit more work.
Do a little bit more work. Do a little bit more disease or dis-ease of comparison. And looking to the left and the right. Why does she get that? Why is that person letting her on her podcast? Or I should be on there. I should do this. Listen, don't judge somebody's breakthrough when you don't know they're been through. You know, if you didn't sleep on the floor with rats crawling over your feet like I did, don't judge me. You know, if you didn't hear a mother praying on her knees, God, please put food on the table for my daughters, then when you look at my luxury vehicle and you come into my gated community and you see the work that we do for the kids in Cambodia and the schools that we build in Africa, don't you look at me and say, I don't deserve it.
And I so appreciate that you now have the voice to say, I dare you to be rich. If you know anything about Allyson, you'll see on her social media, she is calling out all of us to step up and claim what we deserve and work for what we deserve and announce that we do deserve it and not be apologetic about what we've been able to succeed and achieve in life. What I'm curious about and what you talk a lot about is money stories. So I'm hearing that in your transformation of having this upbringing where everything around you, it was normal to be struggling. It was normal to have a family that was divided. It was normal to be on food stamps. It was normal to have this reality. And a lot of people won't question that because it is what's normal. It's what's accepted. And it's honestly, a lot of times what keeps us together in community is understanding that we're all going through the same thing. What was it like for you to break out of that? And I'm curious if you can give a before and after of your money story when you were in that place and when you were dropping out of high school, when you were trying to rewrite your personal statistic of what you could offer in your life. What was your money story in that point of view? And then now that you have all the luxury vehicle, you have the gated community, you have the abundance, what is it now? And it's something that you probably have to rewrite time after time after time after time when you hit new levels of abundance in your upper limits. But I'm curious if you could give a flashback into what your money story was. It meant provision and good mood. What else did it mean to you at that time?
I want to give one distinction because I think that wealth has so many levels. So I think if you put me, right now next to a Warren Buffett, then I'm probably not going to look very wealthy. So it depends on what your level of wealth is that you're speaking to, But when I look at being in the top 1% of society, I am there. And when I look at the fact that the average entrepreneurial female is earning less than $70,000 a year, I think that's so significant that people understand that when people start talking about wealth and riches and affluence, get distinctions, get understanding so that you aren't going toward this target. Mm-hmm. So what I had to do, Rach, was first of all, I had to start achieving at my level. So making $1 million was so far and foreign to me that the first thing I had to do was make $500. So when I started in the coaching world, I had been working for BlackBerry. I was making, maybe I know I wasn't over $120,000 a year. I think I was around 115 or so. And I thought that was phenomenal. I was in my 20s. I loved it. Loved my Amex, loved traveling everywhere on their dime. I really enjoyed that. And then one day, my best friend said to me, "Hey, you really don't like jobs and you keep getting fired."
That's a true friend right there.
Yeah. And so maybe you want to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't even know the word.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what would that look like? And here's what was really funny. She wasn't an entrepreneur, but she had this vision for me. And she told me the vision that day. So what my life looked like at that time was I had a little Ford Focus. It was brand new. I remember posting it on Facebook and the caption was, "The Lord has shifted my focus." And it was with my Ford Focus. Like, don't tell me nothing, boo. And I had on my little shorts and my shirt with the car dealer right there with the big Ford symbol in the back. Like, yes, honey, I have come all the way through. And I remember upgrading my apartment from 480 square feet to 720. And it also had a high ceiling that I paid for. And my parking was now a carport versus the reserved parking that I had next to the dumpster. And so that was affluence to me. I felt like I arrived. If I wanted to go to dinner on a weekend, I could do that. If I wanted to go to the mall, I could do that. I had credit cards, that kind of thing. That made me feel solid. And then when she told me about this entrepreneurship thing, I thought, well, I better go get training and figure out how to do that. And I remember the first time that I stepped on a stage and I went to make an offer and it tanked. Not one person in the room said yes. What that did was it immediately spiraled me into a crisis of confidence.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I was in an immediate spiral. And so when you're in a crisis of confidence, write this down. The next thing is that you're in a crisis of clients and cash flow too, because you cannot attract. No one is attracted to the darkness, or those that are attracted to that darkness with you, to that shadow side with you. That's the only part of you they'll enjoy. So when you do emerge back into the light, they will no longer feel connected to you. They will no longer understand you or feel that you understand them.
That is so powerful to realize. I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I coach go through this incredible up-leveling, and you've probably seen this in your experience as well, of coming from one point A to point B, having to transform their entire mindset, their entire belief system, their entire way that they operate and go about their daily lives. And then they're realizing that the people that they love and felt connected to are dropping like flies and no longer want anything to do with them. And they're getting canceled by their friends and their family. and they're feeling like, what's wrong with me? Why am I alone all of a sudden? Was that the experience for you too, when you had your first come up and your glow up and you're posting your Forward Focus on Facebook? Were people coming at you?
Yeah, the cancel culture is not new, right? It's been around for a while. And I remember there were two other people when I built my first organization called The Purpose Within, which I later folded into another company, was acquired by that company and became an executive within that organization. And so, but I had two people that were working with me, and one was adamant that we not charge. She was adamant that we were light workers and our responsibility was to bring the light and that God would do the rest. And I said to her, I don't believe that God would ask for my yes and then give me a no. So I do not believe that I'm supposed to be out there being the light and then worried about my own light bill.
Right.
Doesn't work like that.
Yes. And
we've not spoken since.
Oh, wow.
We've not spoken since. Now, there's no dissension. Like, I don't ever wake up and think, I hate her. We've just not spoken since because we were not aligned. I knew that if I was going to be doing good in the world, the late Dr. Maya Angelou said it this way: if you do good, you should live well. So then I like to ask the question, are you really doing good if you're not living well?
Wow.
Because the good should be in the four walls of your home first, and the world should have the overflow of the goodness that you live. So if you're only living good vicariously through the work that you project out, and your own internal life is in deficit, then you've got to ask yourself, why are you naming that good? And can you redefine goodness for yourself that includes yourself? There's a term called Genshai, Genshai, and it means I will never treat anyone in the world in a manner that makes them feel small, including myself. And so if you are not in a place where you are in an overflow of abundance and provision, why are you treating yourself small? It's really unfair.
It is unfair. And I think that we operate through this, maybe it's an outdated perception of what it means to be a good person, right? What it means to be a good person. And when I was raised in my family and I was watching people be called good people, bad people, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, I realized that people who were in paths of martyrdom, sacrificing themselves, giving up their own power, giving up their time, their energy, their money, their resources in service of others, I viewed that, oh my gosh, they're such a good person. They're so kind. They're so giving. They're so generous, even at the cost of themselves. I think what we're shifting into now is realizing, oh, that's not sustainable. And if you truly care about creating the biggest impact possible, or the healthiest and most sustainable impact possible in your business and in your relationships, the only way to do that, your only choice, is to give from a full overflowing cup. But what do you think is the main blockage there? For me, I'll be honest, I'm still working through this. Like, there are times when I do want to hide my success, or I want to be small because I don't want to make anyone else feel like, and I'm risky in saying this too, because I'm judging myself saying this right now. I don't want to intimidate anyone. I don't want them to feel like they can't ask me anything. They can be connected to me, because I know how I've perceived people who I view as quote unquote more successful than myself. And I felt intimidated by them. I didn't feel like I was worthy to talk to them or ask them the questions that I was actually wondering about. And I would hate for anyone to feel that way about me. What I realize now is that's not quite my responsibility to control how people view me. And at the same time, knowing that logically is sometimes not enough to move yourself emotionally into that space of really owning what you do have and inviting other people to step into that space with you. Was there ever a moment for you when you snapped and you were like, okay, no more of this hiding, no more of this denying myself the right to shine? What was that breakthrough or that moment for you, if anything? Or maybe it was a slow unfolding of shedding different layers off. But what was that transformation process like for you? Because just asking for myself and for all of my students out there, it's a continual process. And that's what it seems to be for me and the people that I talk to. It's never ending.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
Well, who out there also struggles?
The awareness. So my family is very important to me. And when I started on this path to success, I remember several people telling me, you're going to have to leave your family behind. I made a declaration that would not be real or true. The first time that I had a disagreement with my mother, because when my mother was still on this side of life, she ascended in 2015. I remember when she was frustrated with me that I would not make a decision that required me to be in alignment with the lifestyle that my family was living, which to me was very impoverished. And I was unwilling to do it. And my mother quit talking to me for a few weeks, which never had happened. I mean, she got mad at me when I got my tongue pierced in my 20s, but she had never done that before. And I told her, I am doing this for our legacy. And what I know for sure is that it will pay off. So I'm going to give you the space you need. But I promise you, our relationship will be fortified, even in the distance. Like I knew in myself. So fast forward years later, I'm shopping with my nieces and nephews. And my nephew doesn't want to pick something because he thinks it's too expensive. And I look at him and I ask him, do you believe you deserve this? And he looks at me and says, I don't know. I said, do you want it? Yes, ma'am. Do you deserve it? I don't know. So he didn't know how to answer a deserving. I deserve it, because we don't want to say I deserve something, because the moment you say to someone, you deserve this, no. Yeah. So I decided at that time that anytime I bought something for my nieces and nephews, they would get a speech. Anytime that they would get a speech. And the speech is, when we go to the register and the number comes across, if I'm with 3 nieces or 2 or whatever, I ring them up individually, Rachel, and I say, look at your total. You are worthy of money being spent on you. Every item that you picked out, you are worthy of having. We wanted you in this world, and it's our job to provide for you. You are loved. You are cared for. You are held. You are safe. We love you. We adore you. This is yours and my gift to you. So every time, that's their speech. Every time. And when you ask me, like, when did I notice things change? I started noticing that people responded to me differently because of my money, but it was my choice to decide how I would respond to me. And I wanted to invite humility, but not humility that made me small, humility that kept me grounded and rooted. That's distinct. So when I give that speech, I feel grounded and I feel rooted, that I am their answer in that moment. I feel like I'm a gift. I'm an extension of divine light and source and provision and energy and greatness. Like I just feel so good about it versus feeling like, well, I'm the only one in the family with money, so I guess I better go buy everybody their clothes. Like that's a choice. If you feel that way, that's a choice. If you feel a burden to support others, that's a choice. But if you give yourself permission, the teachings of Abraham say this to us, whatever feels good to you, do more of that.
I'm noticing in you sharing that, how drastically different your money story is from what most of us have probably experienced, what I personally experienced in my life of, nickel and diming. And it had to be that way, I think, for my parents and for my family when we were budgeting and working off that. I think that it was never intentionally, Rachel, you're not worth this money that I'm spending. Never was I ever told that intentionally. And at the same time, what we process as children and what we actually take away from those experiences as children, we don't actually take the time to reason it out and use our logical minds, which are barely existent at that point, to rationalize, my mom loves me, but she's on a budget and yada, yada. Instead, we just feel like a burden. I'm a burden.
The way I processed that work was I went to Sedona And I spent time in Sedona, worked with shamans and worked with therapists, and I still work with them. But when I went the very first time, I spent 5 hours a day in therapy and walking in old Indian hospitals that are outside, and so sitting there and healing and writing old truths and then unlearning them right there and walking through that, finding myself vomiting because I was so emotional with what was rooted inside of me, having Reiki done and having massage done on motion tables that put me back in the womb. So one woman put me naked on a heated table that moved, and she took me through visualization back into the womb and back into the promise of why I came to exist in this world. Yeah. And so
how was your time in Sedona?
Right.
Well, I went back into the womb. What else do you need to know?
What else do you need to know?
That's intense.
It's intense. And I did that work because I knew I was breaking off generational shackles. And I knew that my mother didn't intend to sow the seeds that she sowed into me. And I know that my father probably thought, I'll go back to Allyson one day, and lost that courage, lost that clarity, and then left me with that abandonment all of my life. I know that their intentions were good, but just because you know the person's intentions were good doesn't mean you still have to live with their lessons today. Get yourself into a scenario that supports you, whether that's a therapy app for $30 a month, whether that's a coaching program, whether that's a meetup group, whatever it is, do whatever it takes to find a way to invite your next degree of freedom. The next one, not the massive one that's so far off that you don't know when it's going to come into fruition, but the next degree of freedom. So before Sedona for me was, may have been reading a book or watching a YouTube or, doing those kinds of things. I'm 42. So podcasts weren't around when I was first finding my rising. People actually went out and talked to each other, and Meetup had just started, hadn't been acquired by WeWork yet, like all those different things. And we would go out, and that's how I started introducing myself to that. So, my first personal development workshop was $400. I didn't know how I was going to afford it. I asked 10 people to give me $40 for my birthday, and I went. I stood for my breakthrough, because if you learn to go within, you will never have a life without.
The fire that you bring to this conversation, what I see in that is a ruthless commitment and ruthless focus on what is best for you. What is best for the world is what is best for you, and vice versa. And I am very, very, I suppose the word is in awe of your ability to hold that vision so strongly and so clearly when there's wavering energy around you. And I'm sure that that's why you're so attractive to people in your life. And that's why everyone talks about you like, man, Allyson, if you get her in a room, man, watch out. Like, she is going to change your life. You won't even know it until it's over. And that's been my experience too. You walk in the room, I'm like, my life is different now. And you activate me. And I know that in people that I've witnessed that before, and I hope that at one point in time, I feel the same confidence in myself that that is what I'm here to do. That's what I'm doing. I feel like I have a lot to grow in. I'm still a student of so many different aspects of my life. But I know that there has to be some deeper connection to your purpose and why you're actually here on earth. And when you were sharing the Sedona story about being back in the womb and going back to the promise of why you were delivered into this earth, was there a point of clarity for you about what your purpose is on earth and who you're here to be?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you share that?
My biggest responsibility is POD, be a point of disruption.
Ooh, that's a life purpose right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I get to choose in this lifetime what the modality is. So that could be entrepreneurship. And then I get to choose, is that writing books in entrepreneurship? Is that podcasting in entrepreneurship? Is that running a tech company like I do in entrepreneurship? I get to choose that. So the way that I like to do it is, if you're listening, you can draw, and not driving and not on the treadmill, because I've busted my ass on a treadmill before. So don't do that. Okay. So draw a triangle, and at the base of the triangle, write life provision. On the left of the triangle, write personal fulfillment. And on the right of the triangle, write professional achievement. So the left, personal fulfillment, the right, professional achievement, the base, life provision. I believe that too many people make purpose this big one thing. And really, you've got to break it down. Well, what is my purpose that allows me to have life provision as I desire it? What's that? Do that thing. And that may not be the most delightful thing, by the way, because my life provision used to be being a bill collector for Time Warner Cable, which doesn't even exist anymore. I think it's called Spectrum. But that was my life provision. It worked. But why did I do it? It allowed me to do my first professional achievement, which was to write my first book. And the personal fulfillment was that I made that book a bestseller. Now, how did I make that book a bestseller as a self-published person? I knew I wanted to make $100,000 off of that book. And so I did that. So you got to be able to break down your purpose, your understanding of your meaning in the world. Because people tell me all the time, Allyson, show me the money. I can't show you the money if you don't know your meaning. Can't do it. Won't work. So you got to know your meaning. You've got to know your mission in the world so that your message can shine forward. And you can't curate a movement if you don't know those things. And if you don't have a movement, there's no momentum to be had in your life. And then that also slows down your manifestations, because your manifestation is at the speed of the evidence that you have in your life. So if you are slow about producing evidence, you are going to be slow about manifesting more.
Right. And slow about your belief in your ability to create those results.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So to me, that's when I said, oh, let me break this down for those that I spend time with and teach and mentor and guide. What are the things that you need to sustain you for your life provision? And then what are the things that you want for your professional achievement? And then what would give you personal fulfillment? If you can break your life down into those categories, you can really have a well-rounded life and feel really good about the sacrifices or sacrificial seasons that you have, and not have a lifestyle of suffering, martyrdom, and being a doormat and then calling it used by God. I'm sorry, boo, that's not real.
I love that you also made a distinction between sacrifices or sacrificial seasons. I think we've all been there.
Yes.
There are times when you eat tuna out of a can and that's what you got.
Been there. Tuna and grapefruit. It was my fave. I don't know why I don't eat it today, but tuna and grapefruit was it.
I never got into the grapefruit.
Oh my God. I don't know why it was my jam, but I was like, oh, I am lit. And then $5 Subway footlongs had just released.
Yes, $5 footlong.
Yeah, I think it was back in maybe 2007 or 8 or something. And it was $5 footlong.
I remember that. Thank the heavens we had our $5 footlong.
Yes. And I would get them to cut it in 4s for me. And I would eat a little bit in the morning, a little bit later in the day. And that was my meal for the day.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, no complaints. It was delicious.
Listen, I got myself through. Yeah. And so this was the piece that I wanted to just wrap back around to. At that time, I decided to sell my services as a coach, and I created a coaching program for $295.
What a deal.
The only way that I could sell it was I remembered my mother's Tupperware parties. So I would have my friends gather other friends, bring them together, and they were professional friends and colleagues. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I would do these Tupperware-esque parties where they would have 10 to 15 women. And then I would sell my $300 coaching program. I eventually took that up to $600, eventually took that up to $1,000. But I started making, $10, $15, $20,000 a night. and then making that through the weekends. And that's how my relationship with money, the accrual of money, changed. And that led me into an understanding of wealth. But you're not wealthy when you first make money. You just made money. Yeah. So distinctions.
Yeah, that's actually a great distinction. Can we dive into that a little bit more about the difference between making money and being wealthy?
Well, what you want to do is you want to become a money maker so that then you can be a money mover. So many people that I meet say, when I say, why do you want to make money? The first thing that they want to say is something altruistic or philanthropic, when in reality, they need to just care for themselves. Right. And so you got to be a money maker before you can move money out into the world.
Right.
So be a money maker, then you can become a money mover. So money is meant to allow you to buy yourself into your passions. You know you're wealthy when you have enough money to do the things that you're passionate about. Your business is typically not your greatest passion. And I think a lot of people get confused by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they feel like they're in this midlife crisis. They maybe make their first 10K month and then they're like, oh, I thought I was going to be so fulfilled and so happy. I thought this was the one thing that was going to be so igniting for me to make money doing what I love full time. Everyone says it on their sales pages. Why don't I feel it in my heart? And that can definitely be true. That can feel true when you make your first $10K, $100, $500, $100K, $1 million, you can look at that number and not feel a damn thing. And I think that what you're saying about understanding that your business is not going to be your passion all the time, but what is underneath that business? What does the business represent to you? Does it represent a vehicle in which you can hop into and take care of yourself and provide for the altruistic or philanthropic opportunities that you feel are important? Then it's something that's easy to stick with. But I think that it's at a certain point you have to decide between, are you a passionista, like doing something that you love and basically freelancing for your entire life, or are you going to be an entrepreneur who pioneers new opportunities, new businesses to be vehicles for your main purpose, which has nothing to do with what you say in your sales page?
Yeah. And, you know, a freelancer, in my opinion, is a gardener, and an entrepreneur is a farmer. So a gardener tends to their own territory, which if that's what you want to do, then do that. And a farmer provides places and spaces for others. So I'll give you all an example. What makes me feel wealthy? At the end of last year, I needed some help. And so there's an app called Taskrabbit.
Oh, I love Taskrabbit.
They do
everything.
I light that thing up.
I've met some good people through Taskrabbit.
Listen, I tap on that thing like it's a calculator. Send me somebody to help me, you know? So this woman comes in and I needed her to just clean my kitchen, do some stuff for me. I was getting my hair braided. And when she walked in, she was listening to our conversation and she said, can I interject? And she gave me like a little sales tip. Now, I could have been egotistical and like, do you not know I am the queen of mofo sales? But I'm not like that at all, ever. But I didn't. I said, well, what do you think? And I asked her more of what she thought. She was so smart. And I said, well, I know you don't clean. And all I could think to myself was, when I was a receptionist and I knew I wasn't a receptionist, I knew what I was meant to do in the world, but I had to take that job because I needed that money at that time. So I immediately clicked in and I'm like, this chick is not a house cleaner. Plus, she was missing spots on the counter. It was a whole situation.
She was really not.
She really wasn't. So I'll fast forward this story. I brought her in for my going away party. I was moving from Texas, asked her to come back. Then I asked her if she'd come back and pack me and organize and do these different things. And then I said, can you just tell me a little bit about who you are? Now, by this time, she's been in my space 5 times. And she said, you know, I'm so grateful you invited me to your going away party. I needed that. And I said, why? She said, well, I'm homeless. She's been in my space all this time, been at my party. I gave her a dress code for the party, how she should look, how she should be. She came in beautiful, homeless. I found out she was living in a 1-room, not a 1-bedroom, a 1-room Airbnb for $20 a night with her, her special needs daughter, 11 years old, and her newborn son that was 2 months old. She left that day. I sat with that. I called her that night on FaceTime and I said, I've bought you a place to live for the rest of the year. Then I said, and I'm going to employ you for the rest of this year. And she said, no, you're buying me a place to live. Like, no, don't pay me. I'll work that off. No, you're not. I'm giving you oxygen. She just signed her contract with us as a full-time employee of my company. That to me is a reflection of wealth. When you can be the change that you wish to see in the world, I'm in awe of that situation. I'm just in awe. That to me, you asked for the distinction between having money and wealth. Having money is, I'm a gardener, I can take care of me.
Yeah.
Having wealth is, I'm a farmer, I can provide for someone else. So now she gets to work remotely, take care of her special needs daughter, get her to her appointments and do what she needs to do, and be completely dedicated to her son in the early stages of his life. So she has that level of autonomy that she desires at this particular time. And she has the provision that she needs and the professional achievement. And now it's up to her to choose what she wants to do for her personal fulfillment.
What I see in that is you creating an ecosystem that's so much bigger than you. You know, it's not about Allyson at that point. It's not about her. It's not about the business. It's about an ecosystem that exists to take care of what is existing inside of it, whether that's your employees, who now she's your employee, which is so crazy, special, amazing. And I'm sure that that's a crazy dynamic to have her involved at such a deep level now. Whether it's your employees, your clients, yourself, your team, your audience, your community, it's an ecosystem that all supports itself. And I think that putting ourselves in the position of this isn't about me, Rachel Bell, being the coach or the influencer or whatever it is. This is about me taking care of an ecosystem that's so delicate and so special and so divine and so fueled by this love and this energy of like, I got this. I've got my community. I'm taking care of this. I'm making decisions that are in highest alignment to the health of this ecosystem. It's a different mindset. And that's what I see in your story is keeping the vision so focused on how can you make the decisions that are in the best interest of the ecosystem that you're creating.
Entrepreneurship, I believe, is the courage and the will to live out the big idea for your life. And the big idea for my life, of course, has always been, you know, I want to see people happier, their lives made better, et cetera. But I think about one of my clients, and I love her, Carissa Kuches, who just started Unleash Her Power Within. So she is the #1 female salesperson for Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins' messaging has never had a female focus to it. And now, because of the work that we've done together, and I can't take all credit for that. Carissa was a beast when she came to me. She was dynamic. But because of that, now women and that work are going to be tied together in a way like, do you know how much freedom that's going to bring to the world when women learn to unleash their power? I mean, the question that I want to ask anyone that's listening is, who's waiting on your yes? Because there's a ripple to it. So the moment that I said, yes, I'm no longer going to be in relationships that underserve me. Yes, I'm no longer going to choose to put myself on the discount rack of relationships that exhaust me so much that I can't get on a stage. I can't record a podcast. I can't make a sale. I can't do any of those things. The moment that I looked in the mirror and I said, yes, you desire it. You deserve it. You're so worthy. You know, the moment that I gave myself that yes, then I showed up in the world in such a unique way that now there's a ripple in society. And I could have said, well, Oprah's already a Black woman out there doing that. Lisa Nichols, already Black woman out there doing that. Hell, I could have said Ariana Huffington, already a woman, powerful, doing that. Oh, you know, Sheryl Sandberg, already done. There's so many things that I could say it's already been done. Or I could say I was put on this earth, and every day that my eyes wake up and my feet hit the floor, that my way of showing the universe my gratitude is to be consistent, committed, and to charge for the value that I'm bringing out into the world so that then I have the financial independence to affect the 2/3 of the world that doesn't have that privilege. Because 2/3 of our world still lives on less than $2 a day. They don't have the privilege that I have. And it's my responsibility to go meet them and bring them the provision so that they can then create a new reality for their lives.
Exactly. And you're bringing attention again to the ecosystem. Like you are in creating this amazing ecosystem where you can take care of so much more than just the business. And on the conversation of women and us activating our power, you posted something very, very interesting today that got me thinking on stories today. And you were reflecting on how we view ourselves either as attractive or not attractive enough, usually on the other end of the spectrum of not attractive enough because we're looking left, right, comparing ourselves to every person on Instagram, YouTube, whatever, and how that affects our ability to show up and allow ourselves to say yes to ourselves when we look in the mirror. Could you speak more on what that journey has been like for you and how that's affected your business? Because they're not separate.
Yeah. So I created this program years ago. We retired it also years ago, but it was called the 5-week profit plan. And one of the assignments that I had in that profit plan was that people had to go out and get a picture of themselves in a small kiddie pool. You know, the little rubber plastic pools you see like at Target or whatever. So they had to go do that. And the reason that they had to do that was because it would show them this is what it looks like when you play small.
Oh my God.
So it was this obnoxious way for them to see a grown ass person standing in this kiddie pool. And you had to go by yourself and ask a stranger to take the photo.
That's savage.
And so it was like an assignment, and you couldn't graduate from the 5-week profit plan unless you had submitted this, right? And
did you come up with that?
I did.
That's fucking
and
hilarious.
This was so long ago. Like, I think we even did our sessions on Google Hangout. Like, it was like, this was a long time ago. What I realized was people had this visibility complex. And I decided that the next time I did the program, I was going to write in around this visibility complex. And what I decided to name that segment was inhibitions. What are the things that inhibit you from being seen and allowing yourself to get heard so that you can leverage when people see you and when people hear you so you may be paid? What are the inhibitors? So then I looked at my own inhibitors, and my first inhibitor was my weight. And I felt like, could I not be as successful as someone who were small or maybe more curvy than they were chunky, right? So I thought, so I would hate to go to networking meetings. Hate it. I would hate to put on the Spanx and the pantyhose and all the things. I mean, this was pre-Gary Vaynerchuk. So people didn't just walk around in Vans and rolled up, jeans and a sweatshirt to a networking meeting. You had to be full out dressed. And I felt judged all of the time. Interesting story around that is so many people, when I lost weight, I released over 100 pounds off of my body, and people weren't even really noticing. And the reason was because they were never paying attention to my weight as much as I was. And so that inhibitor was always within me. My other inhibitor was I got a call from the Executive MBA Association that said, we want you to keynote. Well, I dropped out of high school when I was 15. I graduated when I was 19, but I didn't go back and get a degree. So I did not want to take on that gig. I got another call from another educational institution. I turned both of them away. At the time, my speaking fee was $8,000. One wanted me to speak 3 times in one weekend, and I turned it down because of my inhibition around If I step on that stage and what if someone says, what's your education level? What's this? Who the hell hired her? Why would they have put her up here? Not only is she uneducated. Oh, by the way, they're going to bring up my other inhibitor. She's fat. Oh, by the way, they're going to bring up, she's got a pimple. Oh, somebody's going to Google and find out my dad was in prison. So I had all these stacked up stories that validated why I needed to be invisible in the market. And the more that I recited them, the smaller and smaller and smaller I became. And the bigger I became physically because I was hiding inside me. So I was two people in one. So I think that if you're dealing with an inhibition, whether it's acne breakouts, whether it's your education level, I've had women tell me I have a lisp or a gap in my teeth or braces. They could have lymphedema or missing body parts, that they just feel like that is stopping them and that people are paying attention to that. It's kind of like when you go to Soul Cycle. If you've ever been to Soul Cycle, the first time you go, you think everybody's watching you not do all the moves right. But then after that first time, you realize ain't nobody looking at you. They just trying to breathe through it and get through it. And I believe that's what's happening in a lot of life, that nobody's really looking at you the way you're looking at you. They're just trying to breathe through it and get through it the same way you are. So I think time is up for women being managed by a perception of perfection. And what we get to do instead is be surrendered to our purpose, our calling, to know that we are unrepeatable miracles, that there is no one in the world or on earth like us, and that we are so deeply necessary. And when we afford ourselves the grace and the self-love to embrace that, that's when we become a world changer, because we're the first testimonies of the fact that our lives were changed. And then from that, other people get to experience out of our overflow. Again, I just got to keep saying that, we got to stop being in our own cup and be in that space of overflow. And it all starts from the inside.
But that's not to say that people won't call out what your inhibitions are.
Yeah.
Like someone very well could have said, oh, well, she's this, she's that. Why should we listen to her? And for me, like I've had people comment on things that I was super insecure about and that I hope nobody would notice, but they did. And here we are. And what I realize is that we get exactly what we ask for, though. Like we get exactly what we ask for in the respect that if I'm showing up in insecurity and I'm showing up in hiding and I'm showing up in inauthenticity, lack of vulnerability, not being connected to myself, not being worthy, not in that vibration that I deserve the best of the best, and that I do love myself, regardless of what everyone else thinks about me, then I will attract clients who are in that same space. I'll attract people in my life, friendships, toxic friendships that are in that same space, because like attracts like. And the most important thing and the most attractive thing to me is someone who just owns themselves so much that you can't help but want to own yourself just a little bit more. You're like, man, they really love themselves and nobody's worried about it. That's amazing. And you'll attract the most amazing friendships, opportunities, clients, because that's exactly what you're asking for.
Yeah, I remember being in Mexico and I was pursuing Grant Cardone as a client at the time. I was in Mexico at one of his events and the meetup was on the beach. On the beach, which meant swimsuits. Like, what the heck? I couldn't show up on the beach in a turtleneck. And I remember talking myself through it, putting on my swimsuit, putting on my wrap. And when I walked around the corner, Grant stood up, cigar in his mouth. Allyson, girl, get over here. And that just one initial, it just snapped me out of my inhibition and snapped me into my gift. And I walked over there and had just one of the best times of my life that I've ever had in a swimsuit before. And it was such a moving experience. And so you've got to give yourself that opportunity to get out of those zones of comfort so that you can find your zones of genius and contribution. Because purpose is for you. That's an inside job. But until you do that, you'll never be a contributor, which is the external reflection of that purpose. So, you'll know that you're gifted because people will say, oh, Rachel, you're so gifted at this. But you may not ever give that to the world because your purpose, which is the inside conversation you have with yourself, isn't reconciled. So you can be gifted and you can be purposed, but you cannot be a contributor. If you never become a contributor, which means you give out that gifting and that purpose, you will never be great. Because greatness is the fourth leg. You're gifted, you're purposeful, you become a contributor, and then your greatness is actualized.
My body's processing this. I'm like burping and making noises over here. It's like, oh, we're getting downloads over here. It's intense. This is definitely one of my most favorite interviews I've ever done. I appreciate the passion that you bring to this and the way that you have with words. I always tell people if Allyson had a church, I would be an evangelist. I would be getting people through the doors. Come see this woman speak. And you do deliver your message like it's a gospel. Thank you so much for generously giving your time, your gift, your spirit, your love to people who are listening to this podcast episode. And it's one of those things where I just sit back and I listen to you speak and I'm like, wow, imagine if I heard this when I was in my space 2 years ago. Well, you're not there, Rachel. You're here now. What do you need to hear right now about this? So wherever you're at in your journey, my clearest and deepest hope for you is that you were able to glean some amazing transformative lessons from this. I certainly did. And Allyson, where can we get even more obsessed with you and stalk you on your social media, or what do you have going on right now that you would love for us to be aware of?
Yeah, I love the gram. It's my favorite. And I love playing in stories. So if you go on my gram, you won't see a ton of posts. I don't follow Instagram rules like that, but I live in my stories. And there are times in my stories where my swipe up is my journal entry for the day. Cool. Or my swipe up is, do you want to see the proposal that I'm building for a $500,000 deal right now? I popped it on view only for 24 hours for you to take a look so that, if you're building something for $3,000 or $5,000, you can take some of my little tidbits off of that and stuff like that. Yeah. So I believe that I have a responsibility in social media to sprinkle value like confetti. And that's what I try to do, You do that very well.
If you're following her on Instagram, you are a lucky son of a gun. I check in quite often to see what you're up to. And just the soulful conversations that you have over there is amazing too. So refreshing, and you're so vulnerable, but in such a powerful and self-sourced way. It's worthwhile to just take a leaf from Allyson's book and be like, man, I have a lot to learn here. And how can I channel my inner Allyson to show up more powerfully here? So your handle is I am Allyson Byrd, right? Byrd with a Y, B-Y-R-D.
Yeah, Allyson, Allyson, Byrd, B-Y-R-D. Yep. So the last thing I want to leave people with, Allyson means truth. My middle name, Octavia, means royalty, and my last name Byrd means messenger. And so I am a messenger of owning your abundance, your birthright of royalty, and I'm definitely a messenger of truth. And so I would say to anyone that's listening, if you don't know what your name means, go look it up and embody that for the world, because you are fascinating, and you were brought into this world to fascinate and delight us. And we want more of you. The world is so over ready for you. You're such a delightful, incredible, unrepeatable miracle. Please share more of who you are so that we can experience that, and that ripple can be the good that we've all been waiting for.
Amen. Church of Allyson, everyone. That is what you just witnessed. Thank you so much for being on. I love you, girl. I love you so dearly. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, hit us up on Instagram, get connected, follow Allyson, consume her content, and I will see you on the next episode of Payday with Rayray next Friday, next payday. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did find it super valuable, you just want to share it with the world, make sure you screenshot, post, and tag me on Instagram so I can stalk your profile and we can connect more. And to get notified on the next episode here on Payday, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you never miss a beat. Get out there, secure the bag, and I will see you next payday.